Hello, hello, Love Leader community. It's me, Dr. Shannon Live, for our weekly live show. I'm your host, Dr. Shannon Roberts, and I am back to give you the most recent What Do Healthy Couples Do tip. So, I had the honor of going and doing a marriage workshop this week at one of the local churches here in Tampa, First Pres Tampa. So awesome to be amongst that community of couples. And part of the workshop allowed for anonymous questions. And so I'm going to be like sharing those publicly because they come straight from you. Obviously, I field a lot of questions that come in through my email. You can email me at any time with your question, and I'll field that question on my live show as well, maybe possibly even the Love Leading podcast with Dr. Shannon. So, this is one of my favorite categories of topics to discuss. It hits near and dear to my heart. So, the question is it came in, how important is premarital counseling? And what is the divorce rate if you do a deep, intimate premarital counseling program? So, I guess the question speaks to several different levels on how to answer this question. I don't know about you. I did premarital counseling clear back in the 80s, and it was with my pastor. And no offense to anything that was provided, but it was not a deep dive. We did a couple of questions, specifically going into finances, which in which case I remember leaving that office in tears, thinking, we're not going to be able to get married because we aren't going to be able to afford it. But I think that's how everybody might have started when they got married really young. And that is a statistic before the age of 24. A lot of times that is a breaking point of when a higher divorce rate is prior to the 24th year, mainly because I think, obviously, brain development, but also a lot of times there are financial constraints to young couples that might not have finished or completed some kind of specialized training or higher education, not preparing them for some of the challenges of what might necessarily be um, out there, especially today in our day and age of inflation. But but most importantly, and why it's near and dear to my heart is I have three children, and my second one, my 27-year-old son, is going to be getting married in July. And we just had this conversation this last weekend. They are very willing, in lieu of not having to read my book, Naked and Exposed, said, "Oh, Mom, I'd much rather go to my own counselor and do my premarital track rather than have to read my mom's book, especially if there is a chapter on sex." So we made a good kind of negotiated trade. You go. This is the format of the person that's certified that I recommend because that's what I'm certified in, and I'll pay for it. So it was an even exchange. And I guess the reason why I want to share with you today why premarital or early marriage intervention should not be shied away from is because there are some great statistics and research that back it. Um, First and foremost, premarital counseling or early counseling in your relationship can reduce the divorce rate by more than 50%. Okay, that's a big deal. There are a lot of things that impact the divorce rate, and that's for another show. But predominantly, we're still hanging at that 50 to 52% rate of marriages that end in divorce today. We're slightly seeing a trend down. We don't know exactly why that trend down is happening. But we're also seeing the trend up on couples choosing to get married. So there's a lot of co-inflated kind of cause and effect, I'm sure, to all of those numbers. But if more and more couples are choosing to get married these days, all the more reason for me to be talking about this. I don't know if the hiatus on wedding venues and public weddings during the pandemic period of time kind of slowed that down. And so now we're just still catching up. I don't know exactly if the dynamics kind of changed or more trended towards traditional kind of choices in relationships. I'm not sure. But we're seeing a trend up in premarital, I mean, in marriages, and we are hanging still at that 50% or so divorce rate. So if we're saying that premarital counseling can have a significant impact to by 50% to maybe better ensure the overall success of that marriage, why not? I always tell couples, we spend so much time and attention planning the event that we don't necessarily invest in the actual long term commitment. So why not put a few extra monetary budget line item into the planning of the marriage by including a premarital package of counseling? And listen, I think sometimes we think that we have to wait to get into counseling when we have issues or problems. And I do think that we're getting a better understanding and a better idea that sometimes counseling isn't supposed to be this negative bad thing, that we have to have problems or issues before we go and address them. I think we're starting to embrace that a mental health or a counseling intervention is really sometimes all about growth and wholeness and health and prevention. So, going in before these rigid kind of interactions and communication patterns set in, addressing those major kind of stressors or topics on the front end rather than remediating on the back end is ideal. In fact, what the research is telling us is that premarital counseling is associated with lower divorce rates, lower relationship conflict, and higher quality in your relationship. And so, what I want to say is a lot of times, because I see couples from the very beginning, pre engagement, all the way through, high conflict, we're on that last straw before signing the dotted line. I have seen couples all the way through, and the number one complaint that they tell me when they come in is, we cannot communicate well. And so, what they're telling me is that there are some things that we cannot maneuver through that we have conflict over. And so they don't have the skill set to know how to maneuver through those rough patches. And they've been trying to do that same song and dance for a lot longer than obviously would probably be necessary for us to intervene earlier. In fact, research says that couples will think about, plan for, research, talk about, and then finally schedule 4 to 7 years from the beginning to when they finally get in the door. And so by that point, some of those cycles of communications, those areas of being stuck, really have really taken a chronic, rigid now set in. And so premarital counseling allows you to not have to go down that path of hurt and pain. It really helps you to learn from the very beginning, what is that healthy way of approaching conflict? How can we enhance our communication so that we can prevent that unhealth cycle, so that we can have ability to get to work throughs and problem solving. And we don't have a lot of pain points that go unresolved or unaddressed in a healthy way. And that is what I do a lot of times with the couples that have come in, and I am really having to not only, map the conflict cycle that's not working, build the communication cycle that does work, and then we have to kind of go backwards and kind of untease these addressed areas, right? So if you start from fresh, it really is a time when there really is very positive experiences and feelings in the relationship. We're not in that rigid negative sentiment override. I don't want to show up in the same kind of way. And so we have a lot of things going for us at the very beginning of the marriage rather than down the road. And so I want to encourage you that it really is a healthy thing to be able to embrace that, hey, I might not know what I don't know. I've never been married before, or maybe we're going into, another marriage and we don't want to do it the same, but we haven't ever figured out how to do it different. And I don't know if you're like me. I came from a broken home where, maybe I didn't pick up on some of the patterns of necessary effective communication skills. It wasn't role modeled to me. And so if you're the same way, sometimes we bring into the relationship, kinds of expectations and communications that we only know from what we've been taught are shown. So that's your question for today. I want to encourage you, if you know any pre engaged or premarital or even early marital relationships, it's an ideal wedding gift. I know that doesn't sound really kind of sexy or any kind of thing to give a premarital gift card or gift certificate to a couple, but I promise you in the long run, they're going to look back and say, so glad I had that. But if you are a couple that you're thinking, what is the value beyond meeting with, our pastor or priest or rabbi that are going to conduct or officiate at the actual ceremony, what more can we dig in deeper to know and discover to enhance already this really kind of wonderful experience that you're in, but also for a counselor to prompt areas of discussion that you might not have ever that you hadn't already covered or tackled. And so that is your question today. Premarital counseling, absolutely, in the research, enhances your ability to move through conflict well, divorces, the trend towards a higher divorce rate, and it enhances the relationship satisfaction by tenfold. So go and find your local counselor. If you're looking for someone that's certified, I'm certified in the SYMBIS. That's SYMBIS.com. It's saving your marriage before it starts. It's very accurately connected to all of the research. Comes with a beautiful printed out report where each person has been able to fill out their own independent answers online, and then it comes blended. And that is the thing that the counselor takes you through. And so you are able to identify your areas of strengths in the relationship that feel really great. But it also might identify a couple of extra challenges that could be better off being addressed on the front end rather than later on down the road when it gets really significantly worse. So Symbis.com, I work with couples all the time, whether they're local or coming in. What better way to do a pre-moon honeymoon than to maybe come to Tampa, spend a day, 6 hours, and really build up and foundationally ensure the beginning of a lifelong relationship and add to the event of your dreams. So that's Dr. Shannon Live, and I will see you next week.